Separable verbs are words that can be separated or combined. At first glance, a word like 睡觉 looks like a single two-character verb meaning to sleep. However, it is grammatically a verb-object phrase that has become so commonly used that it functions like a single word. 睡 is the verb to sleep. 觉 is the noun asleep. So 睡觉 literally means to sleep asleep. Understanding this verb-object structure is the absolute key to mastering separable verbs. Because it's not a true verb, it follows a different set of grammatical rules. Okay, take a look at the table. Let's start with rule number 1, inserting aspect particles. These are your little grammar helpers like le, gu, and de. The core principle is simple. These particles must go between the verb and the object. Look at the example for 睡觉. A common mistake is to say 我睡觉了. While you might hear this colloquially to mean I'm going to bed now, if you want to say you have completed the action of sleeping, the grammatically correct way is to separate the verb and object. 我睡了觉. You put 了right after the verb part, 睡. Now, for rule number 2, inserting complements. This rule applies when you want to describe how long you did something or how many times. Just like with particles, the complement goes between the verb and the object. Let's use the example 游泳 to swim. You can't say 我游泳1个小时. That's a direct translation from English, and it's incorrect. You must separate 游 and 泳 and insert the duration. The correct sentence is 我游了1个小时的泳. Notice how 1个小时, 1 hour, is sandwiched in the middle. The de is often used to link this whole modified action phrase back to its object, 泳. Now, rule number 3, cannot take another object. Since a separable verb like 见面 already contains an object, 面, meaning face, you can't add another object like him right after it. Saying 我见面他 is grammatically like saying, I meet face him. It's redundant. So how do you fix it? The table shows 2 main ways. The most common way is to use a preposition like 跟 or 和. You move the new person to the front in a prepositional phrase. 我跟他见面. I with him meet. The second, slightly more formal way is to make the person the possessor of the object part of the verb. 我见了他的面. Which literally means, I saw his face. Finally, let's look at rule number 4, reduplication. In Mandarin, we often repeat verbs to suggest a casual, brief, or tentative action, like, let's go for a little walk. With separable verbs, you only repeat the verb part, following an AAB pattern. Take 散步, to take a walk. You don't say 散步, 散步. You only repeat the verb part, 散, to get 散散步. Let's take a little walk becomes 我们散散步吧. The sounds much more natural and relaxed. Here is a list of frequently used separable verbs to get you started. Now, let's do the most important part, putting it all together. Okay, let's dive into our first sentence. I chatted with my friend for 2 hours yesterday. The separable verb here is 聊天, which breaks down to 聊, to chat, and 天, a chat. Now look at the common mistake. 我昨天聊天跟我的朋友2个小时. This is a very typical error where someone tries to just tack on the information at the end. But we know better. We have 2 extra pieces of information, with my friend and for 2 hours. First, how do we add a person? We apply rule number 3 and use the preposition 跟. The phrase 跟我的朋友 goes right before the verb 聊. Second, how do we add the duration? We use rule number 2. The phrase 2个小时 gets inserted between the verb 聊 and the object 天. When you assemble these pieces correctly, you get the natural-sounding sentence 我昨天跟我的朋友聊了2个小时的天. Let's move to our second example. Have you ever gotten angry at him? The separable verb is 生气, which is 生, to generate, and 气, anger. The information we need to add is ever, the aspect particle 过, and at him. Let's apply the rules. Rule number 1 tells us the aspect particle 过 must go right after the verb part, so 生 becomes 生过. Rule number 3 tells us we can't just add him, 他, after 生气. Instead, we use the possessive structure. We're not just talking about any anger, we're talking about his anger, or rather, anger directed at him. So 气 becomes 他的气. Put it all together, and you get the correct question, 你生过他的气吗? Finally, let's look at a very practical request. Can you help me out for a minute? The verb is 帮忙, which is 帮, to help, and 忙, a favor or help. The mistake 帮忙我 is one of the most common errors because 帮忙 already has an object, 忙. The correct structure is a fantastic example of combining rules. We need to insert two things between 帮 and 忙, the person being helped, 我, and the amount of help, which we can express with 一个, 1. This gives us the super common and useful pattern 帮 plus person plus 一个 plus 忙. The full sentence is 你可以帮我一个忙吗? So the key takeaway is this. Don't get intimidated by long sentences. Just identify the separable verb, break it into its verb and object parts, and then use the rules as a guide to slot in all the other pieces of information, like who, how long, or how many times, right into the middle. Practice this deconstruction, and you'll master separable verbs.